Listen to the sound of the shofar. It's a ram's horn. Now, in a moment, I want you to hear it again, but I want you to hear it as if it were you were in the desert and God was speaking to you. You were a Jew and God was trying to get your attention. And all of a sudden, as you were working in the field, you would hear this. And you would know that that was the sound to gather in. It was a sound to get your attention. And the next sound would be to call you to repentance, to think about how you are failing God, or how you have failed him in the past and how he's been forgiving to you. But the next is to think about how you fare in comparison to God and what he asked of you. And the next was a call of awakening to remind you that you have been a temporary dweller, like on the road to Egypt, and that he wants to give you a permanent dwelling, like in Canaan. When we think of fall, we think of pumpkins. We think of fodder shocks. We think of gourds, maybe Indian corn. We think of things that are orange and yellow and brown, and ways to stack hay or bales of hay. And if you're very worldly, you've given over to the things of the devil to decorate for him. But if you keep in a good mind, you're decorating with things like the pumpkin. Maybe you're making a pumpkin prayer out of it, which is where this one's intended to be. And but you've probably call it fall. You may call it autumn, but God would call it the harvest. And the sounding of the trumpet would be one of the very first things that the Jew would have heard. And then the call to repentance, the Day of Atonement. And then the Feast of Weeks, booths, the Feast of Booths or Tabernacle, in which you would have dwelt in a tabernacle dwelling for a while, a temporary dwelling, exposed dwelling, to remind you of the fact that God brought you out of Egypt. Today, I would just like for you to think in terms of the harvest of God. Teach your generations. You know, as I was studying, I noticed several times, I even outlined it, several times he'll say in Leviticus 23, when he was talking to them about the 7 feasts, he says that this is a statute forever for all your generations, in all your dwellings. In another place, he said, this is the Sabbath of rest. You should have a holy convocation. There should be no work. And you should have a Sabbath of the Lord in your dwelling. Time after time after time, he talks about that it should be in your dwelling. I was thinking about that. I think that's a piece that's missing in a lot of church people's lives. When I grew up and in our home, Christianity is just a way of life. Not just a way, it is the way of life. And it's a wonderful thing. It's done in the dwelling. You go to church to worship, but the dwelling, it's done in the dwelling. So remember, as you gather in things, it's the harvest of the Lord. And we should be celebrating what he has given us.